If you have a true scary story, be it paranormal or not, consider sending it my way by going to astheravendreams.com and clicking the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have a small story to share with you and your listeners that goes way back to when I was a little girl. It's not the only story I have to tell, but this one is probably the scariest I have ever experienced. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was just starting school or about to. I grew up in the country with just a few neighbors. I followed my big brother everywhere because I had nothing else to do. There was no internet or game systems back then. We didn't even have cable TV or a VCR. When Blockbuster Video opened up, it was the best thing ever. I loved and looked up to my big brother and followed him everywhere, but he tried to ditch me every second he got. 6 years age difference really stinks. Our parents basically put him in charge of me when they were gone, besides my grandparents. Our only neighbors were my grandparents behind us, my uncle next door, and a little later on, some other neighbors that finally moved in on the other side of my uncle's house. So, anyway, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I had my very first paranormal experience. It is probably the scariest paranormal thing that has ever happened to me. After it happened, I refused to sleep in my own bed for days, and bugged my parents to sleep with them. They didn't believe me and thought the whole thing was hilarious. The house this happened in was torn down years ago, by the way, thankfully. I called it the old White House because it was white with black trimming. I don't need to explain the whole layout of the house, just know that my room, the only one with ugly puke green walls, for some ungodly reason someone thought that was a good idea, was located at the end of the hallway across from my parents' room. I hated that room. It was miserably hot in the summer with no AC. So, one night, like every other night after brushing my teeth, I turned off my light and slid into bed at the far side of the room across from the door. I always sleep on my side, and settled on my right side first beneath my blanket, with my back facing away from the wall. I kept the door a little cracked because I was still afraid of the dark. After a minute, I got tired of that side and flipped over to my left side facing the wall. Looking up at my wall, I expected just to see that. What I saw instead caused me to freeze and stare. I saw a solid black figure of a man with a top hat on his head, about 2 feet above the edge of my bed and facing me. But I couldn't see any features. It was all just solid black and so real and close to me that I could have easily touched it. Instantly, my young brain thought that it was Abraham Lincoln, as silly as that sounds. I remember my heart racing and I started shaking. I screamed and scrambled out of my bed so fast that I got tangled in my blanket, falling to the floor. I remember struggling to get up, sure that at any second it would get me, and I took off to my parents' bedroom. I woke them up and told them that I saw Abraham Lincoln in my room at the edge of my bed. My mom kind of stared at me in confusion and disbelief. They did not believe me no matter how much I tried to convince them. They let me stay with them for a few days until I finally got the courage to go back to my own bed again. Those first few nights, I laid as far away from the wall as I could and stared at it until I fell asleep. I'm sure now that what I saw was what people call a shadow figure, and I feel better and validated that I'm not alone. I've read a lot of other people's stories of shadow figures. Many years later, my own kids have all said to me that they've seen shadow figures, and I believe them. Those incidents all took place in another house. A lot of stuff happened in that house, but those are stories for another time. I left that place about 3 years ago, and moved into my current home. This took place in 2022. I live in a rural area in North Carolina. My mother lives a football field length away from my house in the back. The first incident took place while I was terribly sick with a kidney infection. I decided to camp out at my mother's house because I'm a big baby while sick, and my 4-year-old at the time was with me while my mother was at work, meaning no one but me and my child were at the house, with a deadbolt locked at the front door, and in the back a twist lock on the doorknob. My mother has her TV positioned directly beside a window that lets in hella daylight. I had gotten up from bed to use the restroom, and then returned to my bed. That is, until I noticed a tall black figure run past the window. It moved out of this world fast. The window is perfectly off the ground outside to where anyone can walk up and look into the house easily. The only person it could have been is my 4-year-old. I figured she used the back door and slid outside. Being mad, I went out the front door yelling her name, only to have her come from the back of the house up behind me, claiming she'd been in the restroom. She had not been outside. I thought it was weird, but I let it go. That is until my mother asked me if I'd noticed anything black running past her window outside. I got sick and my stomach flipped. Seeing this thing got so normal that, while watching TV, my mother would say, "Did you see it?" just to get confirmation that she wasn't seeing things. I found myself doing the same thing. It always traveled from the front of the house to the back directly next to the house. It all came to a head the day my mother and I witnessed this thing stop in the middle of the window and doubled back towards the front of the house. My heart hit my toes and jumped up when I noticed why it turned around. A movement neither of us had seen before, because my 4-year-old was outside playing in the front yard. When I opened the front door, I saw my daughter about to round the corner of the house and yelled for her. My daughter and this thing would have collided together, or did. That part's unclear. I asked her if anything weird happened, and she was carefree. After that, I decided to sage the house and outside the property. I will add that my family has been on this land forever with no spooky happenings until now. After saging, it did return a good 4 to 6 months later. We never saw it in the house, only running by the same window in the same direction. Other than the day my daughter was outside playing, how did it know she was outside? Why haven't we seen this thing until now? I had to sage the property a second time and everything's been quiet. Fingers crossed. My story isn't terribly scary, but I assure you it's terribly real. Hi, Raven. Almost 8 years ago, I bought a house in the suburbs for my then 13-year-old daughter, myself, and our Maltipoo Lulu. The house was in a great school district, the one that I grew up in. My ex-husband and her father had not really been in our lives for a long time. I really wanted to get my daughter into good schools so that she would have a chance of getting into a good college. As a single woman, living in the burbs was not my idea of bliss. I bought the house as part of an estate sale. The house was being sold by the surviving children of the woman who had owned it previously but had passed away. At that time, I didn't know that she had passed away in the house. We moved into the house in October of 2017. I met a bunch of the neighbor ladies, and they were wonderful. We're all still friends to this day. As I normally do when I move into a new space, I burned white candles in every room of the house, leaving a window cracked so that if there were a spirit, it could find its way out. A little background, I've always been very intuitive. I've had spirits reach out to me, although I'm not really sure what they wanted. Generally, I've told them that I didn't have anything to offer them and they should move on, and usually they did. We lived in the house for 6 or 7 months, and I never noticed anything strange. Then, one night, my next-door neighbor and I went out to have margaritas. I don't drink a whole lot, but margaritas are something I do like. On the way to the Mexican restaurant, my neighbors said they really missed Jean, the woman who lived in my house before me. She said that she was the one who came into the house to check on Jean and found her passed away in bed. I said, her bed in my bedroom? My neighbor thought that I knew that the previous owner had died in the house. I did not. It didn't seem like a huge deal to me. In fact, I felt pretty happy for this lady that, although suffering with cancer, she got to spend her last days in her own bed in her bedroom. I would want the same thing for myself. Here's where it gets a little strange. The staircase to the second floor ends right outside my bedroom door. This is one of those houses with the master on the first floor. The day after my friend and I had gone out for margaritas, I got up early to let Lulu out. She sleeps with me. I'm a crone, don't judge me. I got up and called her to jump off the bed like she did every morning. She was very hesitant, so I picked her up and carried her to the back door. I slid open the slider and placed her on the kitchen floor. She tore out of that house like the floor under her was on fire. That was surprising to me because she doesn't usually have that much energy that early in the morning. I turned around to make my coffee and glanced up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, I could see a dark figure. It was sort of a fact that I saw it, and it didn't really scare me. It just sort of startled me. For a moment, I thought it was my daughter. I looked away, looked back, and it was gone. I texted my daughter. Yes, she was upstairs and I was downstairs. Again, don't judge me. She texted back and said, "I'm sleeping and I have 20 more minutes." I asked her if she had been out of her room, and she said, "No, leave me alone, I have 20 more minutes." I got my coffee and went about my morning, although I couldn't get Lulu to come back into the house. I ended up picking her up and putting her in the kitchen. She ran from the kitchen into my room and under the bed. Something she's never done before. I took my daughter to school and returned home. I worked at home, so I powered up my computer and started my day. I couldn't get past the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, just a weird feeling. Finally, I had the sense of dread deep in my stomach. Suddenly, my legs and arms and feet ached. Somehow I knew that Jean was making her presence known. I stood from my desk, looked up at the ceiling, and said, "Jean, I know this was your house and you loved it very much. My daughter and I will also love it. Thank you so much for letting us have this home. We're going to love living here for a long time." Just then, I felt fine, back to normal. As ridiculous as it sounds, the sun came out of the clouds for the first time that day. Lulu gingerly came out of my room. She walked over and looked up at me. I told her that everything was going to be fine. I never saw any dark figures or shadows again. I'm just kind of bummed that the white candles didn't work, as they've always worked before. I love your stories, Raven, and thank you so much for reading mine. These are all of the strange things that have happened either directly to me, to my mother, or both of us together. We lived in a house built around 100 years ago with pine wood floors, surrounded by farmland and forest. One night I was in the bathtub and I heard the kitchen door shut, then heavy footsteps leading from the door, through the kitchen and up the stairs. The stairs are adjacent to the bathroom in that house, so I yelled out, "Hi, Dad," as I assumed it was him. He worked at a ceramic factory and was required to wear steel-toed boots, so he always had heavy-sounding footsteps throughout the house. There was no answer, which was odd to me. The footsteps continue up the stairs and into my parents' bedroom. Then I hear my mother walking from the living room, through the kitchen, up the stairs, and into her bedroom. And she says, "Hello?" But nobody responded. After I finished my bath, I asked my mom, "Did Dad come home already?" As he wasn't expected to be home until after I was in bed due to working swing shifts. She was obviously creeped out and said, "No, nobody's here but us. You heard that too, right?" "Yeah," I said hi because I thought Dad was home. Strange, but that's just a minor incident in comparison to some of the other happenings in that house. I won't get into detail here, but there were many times my mother experienced sleep paralysis with an entity that pinned her to the bed with its hands on her chest. Until one night she'd had enough and exclaimed to the entity, "Please just let me sleep. I'm really tired and I have to get up early and I really wish you would just leave me alone. Please just let me sleep." And from then on, the strange things seemed to have ceased. And yes, I asked my mom for permission to tell these stories. I have a ton of ghost stories, but I'll stick to the really strange ones. I have a ton of stories about my cousin's house that are very strange. One night, my parents and I were visiting with my cousins, with his parents. We were kids at the time. Our parents were in the kitchen playing poker, and my cousin and I were in the living room watching TV. It was Christmas time, as there was still a decorated tree in the living room, coupled with the toy train around the bottom. Out of the blue, the train starts going around the track on its own. Nobody was near it when it started. My dad went to shut it off and picked up the battery box, and there weren't even any batteries in it. How the heck is that even possible? Needless to say, my cousin and I were pretty creeped out, so we went upstairs to play in his bedroom. A little while later, we hear a loud bang coming from the living room, followed by both of our parents yelling our first and middle names. A no crap moment for a child. So we go running down the steps and into the kitchen where our parents were, and they were just looking at us all confused. My uncle says, "You guys weren't in the living room?" We say, "No, we were upstairs." So him and my dad go into the living room and find a glass ashtray. You know, the old kind that was really thick glass and kind of tinted brown. Split exactly in half, and on opposite sides of the coffee table. How in the actual hell does something like that happen? Nothing fell onto it, nobody dropped it, nobody was even in the room. They didn't have any pets either. We left shortly after that. That house had some seriously bad energy in it, and that's not the half of it with that house from what I've heard. But that wouldn't be my story to tell. But thanks. I just recently started listening on Spotify and am very intrigued with the stories, and felt compelled to share my own. Hello, Raven. I'm a 34-year-old male, but this story dates back to when I was about 7 or 8. I was raised in Central Virginia, but all of my mother's family lives in a small town in North Carolina. It's not extremely small like the towns you see in a lot of country movies, but it's still small enough to where everybody pretty much knows everybody. Back when I was 7 or 8, myself, my sister, and my mom had to travel back to North Carolina because my great-grandmother had passed away. Considering the size of my mom's family, by that age, I've been to my fair share of funerals, so nothing was out of the ordinary. At least not until later that night. Because my family was so huge, it was common that, rather than spending money on a hotel, we would just stay at a relative's house whenever we visited. The night after the funeral, I decided to stay with my cousin because he had bunk beds, and I preferred that over a couch. So as I was laying in bed attempting to fall asleep, I couldn't help but to think that I was being watched. You know that feeling you get when someone is piercing their eyes through your soul as a way to get your attention? Yeah, that feeling. Mind you, his bunk bed is against the wall, and I was facing the wall as I laid down. and his door was closed. So I didn't really think that someone was behind me. On top of that, my cousin was in the dead of his sleep. But because this feeling was so intense, I felt the urge to turn around to see if someone was indeed there. As I turned around, I saw what appeared to be a bluish-white mist just hovering and looking at me. I saw what looked like a head and shoulder shape, and the rest just mist-like. It was for no more than maybe 10 seconds, and the more I looked at it trying to figure out what it was, the more terrified I became. At this point, I just cried out for my mom, who was also staying the night. Then my mom and my aunt came running in the room and asking what was wrong with me. I couldn't bring myself to tell them why I was crying. As a surprise to me, she actually remembered that exact night and her running into the room. I believe this moment in my life is what has me infatuated with the paranormal. This moment that I could not explain. I was fully awake because I never even drifted off to sleep because of the weird feeling I had of someone watching me. I've had similar experiences as I've gotten older, which I may write about separately. But one thing I always ask myself is, was that my great-grandmother who simply came back to visit me? I don't recall much of her, but she was really nice and had very long silky gray and black hair. Whatever it was that night, it got me going down a rabbit hole ever since, trying to figure out life after death and paranormal events. And that's my story. I'm not sure if it's quite paranormal, but I thought that was the best description. When I was a teenager, a long time ago in the late 80s, me and my best friend at the time were hanging out at her apartment on March break. We were trying to cast spells, and just being dumb teenagers basically. I thought that it would be funny to see what happened if we dialed 666 on the old landline phone, fully expecting the phone to give us either a "your call cannot be completed as dialed" recording, or just nothing at all. Instead, what we heard scared us so badly that we hung up immediately. It was a moaning, screaming sort of noise, mixed with a squelchy, sticky sound. Being a bit braver, I tried again to see if we got that same result, but this time I just got a fast, busy signal. I didn't try it again. Screw that. If I recall correctly, my friend grew up Catholic. I think she might have been doing some hasty praying between the two calls. I identify as atheist, but I still wonder what we got connected to on that phone call. My friend and neighbor lost her husband, Johnny, 2 years ago. She's 88. They had lived in that house for 65 years and had moved there 2 months before she delivered her first son of 2. Needless to say, she had never spent a night without her husband, ever, and had married at the age of 20. One night as she was lying in bed, she clearly heard him say, "Hey, little girl." And another time as she sat in a chair at the kitchen table, he moved her whole body by gently scooting her chair a good distance back. So, later on, I told her I would take her to her eye surgeon to perform a cataract operation. I also agreed to stay the night so that I could guide her to the bathroom in the night, or whatever she needed, since she only has the operated eye, since the other is non-functioning due to a prior stroke. I lay in the bed, and she had one of those mattresses that you can't feel a thing where the other person is lying so that it won't disturb you. Suddenly, I was really disturbed. "I think we're having an earthquake," I told her, but she couldn't feel it. Kentucky is on the new Madrid fault line, so it was sure possible with quakes and volcanoes and tsunamis that we've had lately. I asked if she had one of those vibrating beds. No. I do, and it allows you to sit up or down at different angles or hit vibrate for a noisy massage. It did it 3 times, and each time she'd said she didn't feel a thing. Then, it hit me. It was her husband thanking me for helping her. I slept without incident for the rest of the night. One other thing also happened in her bed. One night she told me that she awoke and had gone into the bathroom. After covering back up, she heard her mother say, "It's going to be really cold tonight. Could you bring me an extra blanket?" Flabbergasted, she said right out loud that yes, she sure would, and placed that blanket right on Johnny's side of her bed. Just how many people are in that bed anyways? Hi, I live in Eugene, Oregon. As you may know, there are many cryptic stories all over Oregon, especially in this part of Oregon. I'm pretty sure that I live next to a portal. The street that I live on is 1/4 of a mile long, and you can feel the charge as soon as you turn onto my street, especially at night. Okay, I rent a room in a house that my girlfriend and her boyfriend manage. For some reason, when she and I are together at the house, or out and about, all kinds of strange and creepy things happen. Like the post office incident that I'm going to share with you now. A few months ago, my girlfriend had to run to the post office to send a package to a friend. It sounds easy and safe enough, right? Nope. Let me start by saying that it was after 9 p.m., but this particular post office is open 24 hours for drop-offs. Anywho, she was telling me the last time she was at this location during the day, she saw 2 ghosts at the door, and they were more surprised that she saw them. Like, they didn't want to be discovered or something. And as we pulled into the parking lot, oh yeah, this was my first time being at this particular location, my neck hair pricked up, and I felt cold all through my body, and was instantly anxious. My friend was feeling the exact same way, and as she got out of the car to enter, I began saying protection mantras like imagining white light around her, and asking Jesus to keep her safe. And I was watching her the entire time. Something I wouldn't normally do, by the way. I watched her put her mail in the drop, turn around and take a step towards the door. On her second step, I saw as her head snapped forward and she flew across the corridor. There were no carpets or anything for her to trip on. It literally looked like someone had shoved her hard. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get out of the car and couldn't get the door to open, and I was frantically trying to get the door open so that I could jump out and see if she needed any help. By the time I got the door open, she was hobbling back to the car. She had handprints on her upper right shoulder, and I took pictures. Needless to say, she's no longer allowed to go to that post office at night, nor alone. So that, my friends, was this week's first collection of paranormal stories. Stories about hauntings, ghosts, paranormal happenings, and other weird, just supernatural stuff, right? Definitely some weird stuff this time around. Definitely some fantastic stuff this time around, but definitely some weird stuff. And hopefully you enjoyed this weird, supernatural stuff, because this is one of 2 paranormal videos this week. On top of that, there will be a 3rd paranormal stories video this month, near the end of the month. So I got an abundance of paranormal stories submitted to me. A lot of them, quite a few of them actually. So yeah, just good creepy stuff gonna be put out there for the rest of the month. Sorry, I'm looking on my schedule. Yeah, so another one this week, and then one more, I think, on the 26th is the intended date. That's what I have listed, so. But, some really good stuff for the rest of the month. If you guys, want specifics, I could use some more childhood scary stories, like scary things in your childhood. I have a few. I have 3 that are really good. And then some more Home Alone stories, just stuff that happened while you were home alone. Can be anything, as long as it fits those topics. As you guys know, I'm fairly open, so on both of those topics, I have a good number of stories, but probably not enough to make a full video. I probably could make them a full video. I just want my videos to be at least 35 to 40 minutes long, so yeah, you get the gist of what I'm saying. If you got them, send them in. Go to astheravendreams.com to do that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, like the video. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider hitting the subscribe button. That'd be awesome. You can also leave me a comment down below with your thoughts on these stories, how you're doing, how it's going, whether or not you enjoy paranormal stories. If not, that's fine, I get it. You don't have to. But if you do, let me know. Let me know if you're looking forward to it, because the rest, the other ones, the ones you haven't heard yet. Yeah, that'd be awesome. It would also just be awesome if you went down to the comments and just told me how you're doing. I'd love to hear from you. I'm doing pretty good. Patience and I are planning a 1.5 day vacation this week. By the time you hear this video, we will most likely, we definitely will, already be back home. So, we're going to go do something on Monday, out of town, and stay at a hotel. Then we're going to come back home on Tuesday. Very short vacation, we can afford to do it, so we're going to do it because that's what you do with your free time, right? If you have time off, you take it, and you do the best you can with it, so... Anyways, you can also join Patreon memberships, get early access to content like this. Members and patrons will get early access to this video for sure. It'll go up for you all on Tuesday, but for them, it'll go up on Sunday. Wow. Several days early because of aforementioned vacation. You can also listen on other platforms such as Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Amazon Music, what I meant to say, Pandora, etc., etc. Tons of places. Yeah. I think that's all. If not, oh well. Hopefully you all enjoyed the stories, hopefully you're all having a beautiful week, and hopefully I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.